What's up, everyone? It's Adar coming at you with another episode of Startup Engineering Daily. Let's hop right into it. So our first is a few tweets here from Vercel and Guillermo. They're announcing these new services called Vercel Services, where you can host multiple apps on the same Vercel project. Very sick. And you can see here they have the post about Vercel services, but we'll just kind of go through some of the releases that came along with this. So first is, as we said, you can now run multiple frameworks in one project on Vercel, declare each service under the services key in Vercel.json and route between them explicitly. So you can see here you have services my front end, framework Next.js, and then my backend, root backend, entry point main app. I'm not sure what example this would be, but I guess it's probably like an Express or something similar, maybe a Nest.js, which I do have a lot of experience with. And it would be very sick to be able to host this on Vercel because now I guess you can do long-lasting services, which kind of gets into the next tweet, which is that you can now run any Docker file on Vercel. So, just basic deployment. So you can run any Docker file on Vercel. And I assume this means you can do long-running servers under the hood now. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it is using the fluid compute that they've built. They've invested in over the past 2 years, I would say. Maybe since 2024, which is essentially serverless, but it already has machines running that have copies of your app, so it can just run them instantly instead of having to wait for a cold start, essentially, is what they've solved with Fluid Compute. And then also the scalability is very high. And then obviously, along with deploying Docker containers, they now have a container registry themselves, so you can store your images and you can use them in functions or sandboxes. Sandboxes being like their AI agent product, which you can launch a isolated environment to run software. And then another piece too that came out a little bit before this Docker stuff, but is very incredible, which is that WebSockets are now supported on Vercel, so you can build real-time apps using standard node libraries, including socket.io, which was created by Guillermo way back in the day. I think it was early 2010s was when he created it. So it kind of comes full circle now that Vercel now supports WebSockets, so you don't have to use AWS API Gateway or any of these services that are strictly built around WebSockets. I still think using Convex as a database is incredible because you have that reactive database and they handle all of the WebSocket code for you. You don't have to do anything. It's fully abstracted out. But if you do want to build something with WebSockets, you can now do it fully on Vercel, which is obviously incredible. Though it is in public beta, so be wary of that. But, they have very high quality bar over there. And then just since we're on this Vercel story, I just wanted to add this update too that came out for TurboPack in the Next.js 16.3 preview. So 90% less memory in dev, up to 5.5 times faster builds via the file system cache, faster HMR in dev startup, experimental Rust React compiler, import.meta.glob support. What this does, this import meta.glob, is basically the example they use in the blog post is if you have a list of posts or a bunch of markdown files for blog posts, you can just import all of them at once and then loop over them as if they were objects, but it's just blobs or globs. I don't know the difference. Okay, then next, this doesn't really affect me too much, but I do find it fascinating just to keep up with the news here, which is that Stripe and Jeff Weinstein, who's product at Stripe, is announcing a new open stablecoin called Open Standard. It was co-designed by more than 100 companies, including Visa, MasterCard, Coinbase, Cloudflare, Google, to help all businesses thrive with shared economics. OUSD will become the default stablecoin across Stripe later this year. And then there's also this reply from Joseph, which is a good question. How does this coexist with Tempo, which is another stablecoin product that Stripe has? And OpenUSD will be one of the many stablecoins that will be able to run on the Tempo blockchain. OpenUSD will be able to run on other blockchains as well. So in short, Tempo is stablecoin neutral and OUSD is blockchain neutral. The post itself isn't too detailed, but I think the website does have more information, but it still comes with a problem. I have a lot of experience with handling web payments, obviously. It's just at the end of the day, stablecoins are going to make it so you don't have chargebacks, which is obviously a very huge benefit, right? And could effectively kill the credit system, even though from a consumer side, you still want to be able to charge back, but from a merchant side, you don't want it. And it's kind of this game theory balance. But if you as the consumer have to sign up for a new platform to purchase a stablecoin and you have to do KYC to be able to purchase it, then you're essentially in the old regulated system, which you have with credit cards, but you don't get any of the benefits as a consumer. So it's really hard to convince these people to actually purchase this stablecoin for usage. It would be great if you get the wires together where it's I pay with credit card, but the merchant gets stablecoin, and then basically Stripe would be on the hook for the disputes. But I guess from a business model perspective, that doesn't really make too much sense. But that's where I would want to see the innovation if it's possible. Okay, then next we have a tweet from the Tinycorp, which is Tinygrad. They're essentially an AI framework, is my understanding. I used to be really big into them, but I'm not sure how they've evolved over time. But they also build AI machines that you can use internally, and they're basically building a semi-sized data center as well that you can buy, basically, that you could put in your office or wherever. But they're really hating on Anthropic, so there's been so much Anthropic drama, I've missed so much of it. I need to cover a lot, and this is where there's so much news to cover. But long story short, Anthropic made an announcement essentially that I think it was Alibaba, but I don't want to fully say that. But they said that these models GLM, so I don't know if GLM's from Alibaba. Let me check real quick. Yeah, it's not. It's a private company. I think it's also I think I remember reading something where the owner of the company has 70 or 80% of the company, which is pretty cool as well. But basically Anthropic was saying that they had been attacked with distillation attack. I do think they accused Alibaba as one of them. And Tinycorp and Tinygrad is basically just like, I can't believe how many people are believing this propaganda. You can read how GLM-5 was trained in the paper. Maybe Claude was distilled from Chinese models. I haven't seen a paper from Anthropic, and accusations are often confessions. That's pretty funny. Would be interesting. Obviously, like Theo has said, like DeepSeek R1 was a big change when the reasoning came out, and that helped all the frontier models add their own reasoning and really drive the industry forward. So open source models are very important. And actually, Theo has a whole video about open source models and why, like, you're not going to be able to self-host them, in my opinion. I have had really interesting debates with my colleagues about this, though, about, will it be on-device AI? But nonetheless, what I thought was interesting for the viewers is that you have these papers here, so you could check them out. You could see how these like really high-end models are being trained. Obviously, they're not as good as the Frontier Lab models, and you can't really self-host them because they have like a trillion parameters or whatever. But nonetheless, it's so sick that like we have this open research, and it's really on us to get the knowledge, and with AI it just makes it so much easier to distill the knowledge into our brain as opposed to like distillation attacks. And then just like on a similar note, in this next story, Comma.ai, so Tinygrad is the engine, I believe, for OpenPilot, which is Comma.ai. They're a self-driving car company where you can install a device that makes your car self-driving, and they use the software that's open source for self-driving called OpenPilot, and I believe it does use Tinygrad under the hood. So Comma.ai, the company, has now banned Anthropic as a vendor, and you can see here, new rule, Comma employees are no longer allowed to send Comma dollars to Anthropic. They've repeatedly shown they do not respect the sovereignty of their users, and they're trying to lock business customers into high usage costs, API billing only for enterprise customers, Fable only with usage credits. It's important we do not become reliant on expensive outside services. We should instead invest time/money to improve our own infrastructure. Comma sells machine learning computers. We are capable of doing model inference ourselves as long as they're decent open models. So that's really sick. I don't know Harold, this guy. I guess he's CTO at Comma, so I'm going to have to give him a follow. But obviously the company was started by George Hotz, who's one of the software engineering legends of the past, and I guess the present as well. So just very interesting, all the politics and the drama is super fun to keep track of. Anthropic has really bad press. Obviously, we've been talking about this for pretty much months now at this point, and they haven't really gotten any better. But the battle between Fable, GPT-5.6, all these new models coming out, I'm going to have to catch up and keep you guys updated as well, but just super interesting moving forward.